All right, so I started this process with a fully prepped and painted cup. I always sand my tumblers first before applying spray paint. Then I apply my spray paint in a swirling motion until I get the coverage that I'm looking for. Next, I mix up about 5 milliliters of resin. I'm only going to use about 1 milliliter to coat the cup before applying my glitter. To make this process easier, heat up your tumbler. Just set it in front of a heater for just a few minutes so that it's nice and warm to the touch, and then your epoxy resin will go on like butter. Once it's time to start glittering my tumbler, I always start with laying out my chunkiest glitters first. I start by lightly sprinkling. The key here to a really good ombre is to lightly sprinkle and build your layers very slow. So you'll go back over the cup several times, adding a little bit each time. Once your layout is achieved, once you have the colors that you want and the places that you want, then you can really start to let the glitter flow. Alright, so next you're ready to add your first layer of resin. For this 25-ounce tumbler, I mixed up about 40 milliliters of resin. I did not use all 40 milliliters, but I wanted to make sure that I had good coverage. Since I used a lot of chunky glitter on this design, it'll help on the next step. You won't have to sand as much. Then I applied sparsely in a few places, just a few colors of chunky glitter to add some depth to my design. Now you're ready to sand your tumbler. I always sand my tumblers in my sink. That way I can run water and kind of minimize the resin dust because it is hazardous. So if you're not using this method and doing it in a sink where you have access to water to wet down the dust, I recommend definitely using a respirator while you're sanding. So here I want to make sure that my top rim is sanded really well. I want to make sure that I can see a thin line of stainless steel at the very top, right before you get to the edge of the tumbler. This will give you enough space for your resin to have a really good seal. Next, I'm going to take some acetone in a paper towel and just clean out the inside. And I will also take my craft knife or X-Acto knife, whatever you have, and get out any chunks of resin that may have come up over the edge. Now we're ready to add our marble swirl. I'm going to start by mixing up 30 milliliters of resin. I'm going to use about 15 to 20 milliliters to coat the entire cup, and the other 10 I'm going to divide up for the two colors that I want to use for my marble swirl. For the 20 milliliters that I used to coat my tumbler, I added just a small amount of glitter shimmer dust, and I will link the one that I used in the description below. It just adds a little bit of extra sparkle. For my marble swirl, I just added mica powders to my resin. I just got these mica powders off of Amazon. I'll try to find the ones that I ordered and link them in the description below. I started with my purple first. This was a really pretty pearlescent purple. I went kind of light on the mica powder when I added it to my resin, and it ended up being a little too translucent for me, but I thought it turned out to be really pretty, a really pretty accent, because later you will see that I just ended up adding some hot pink to that purple, and it actually turned out really pretty. So the key to getting a really good marble swirl is just to take your time. A lot of times less is more. My video here is a little sped up, but you really just want to take your time, move slow, don't add too much at a time. You can always take away, you'll just have to use a gloved finger and kind of wipe it away, but you want to try to avoid that because that kind of affects the flow of the resin over the cup. You'll see here that I just used my glove finger to kind of spread out any parts of the mica powder that I felt were too wide or too thick. Now we're ready for our final coat of resin. You want to make sure that you wipe down your cup with something lint-free. I just used coffee filters. This will ensure that there's no imperfections or fingerprints prior to putting on your final coat. And right here you'll see that I'm just pushing down the edges of my decal. These specific leopard spots have a few places where they like to kind of stick up sometimes depending on the vinyl that you use. But I just pushed them down so that they were nice and smooth before I applied my resin. For this final coat, I mixed up 30 milliliters of resin. I only used about 20 to 25 milliliters, just enough so that I couldn't feel the decals underneath the resin when I was applying it. And just so we don't waste any resin, anything that's left over, I'll add a specific color glitter or something to match my cup and put it in a keychain mold so that there is no waste. And here is the final product. I absolutely love the way that this turned out. This is probably my favorite technique. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you love it, give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys again next week.